So, education. What actually is it? Education's always been a massive passion of mine. I've always loved learning about new things, thinking critically, and challenging the world around me. However, formal education can often curb that love and enthusiasm that we see in so many young people. And for me, it definitely did. As a young black kid growing up in Southeast London, I attended one of the worst schools in my area. And so, as you can imagine, my early education was probably a sight for sore eyes. But not necessarily in the ways that you may assume. It was for many of the same reasons that my friends who attended some of the most privileged institutions in the country also had to endure. It was the coupling of lower expectations for students of colour with an unrepresentative curriculum which had its base in the pain of colonialism. What I mean is that even though I went to a bad school, I was one of those students that was still achieving quite well. Yet teachers still put up this ceiling of achievement for me. I have learning difficulties. I've got dyslexia and dyspraxia. However, every time I tried to broach this conversation with any of the teachers at my school, they would just brush it under the carpet and tell me not to worry about it and that I didn't have it. I mean, I don't know what made them educational psychologists overnight, but as a young person, you're taught to listen to your teachers, accept what they have to say, and just leave it at that. So I did. But upon reflection, I can see that that was that ceiling of achievement that they had installed for me. That because I was already exceeding the expectations that they had set for me, they couldn't conceptualize anything else as holding me back from that. So is that what we call unconscious bias? I always think this term unconscious bias is quite funny, actually. I feel like using the word unconscious is a way of absolving ourselves of any guilt because due to the prejudices that so many people are complicit in, which are in fact racist, sexist, homophobic, ableist, and so on and so forth. But we use the word unconscious because that means that we don't have to actually confront the structural inequalities that exist in our society and that so many of us take part in. And we don't have to confront how many teachers and academics look at their students of colour with a perception of less hope and less ability. However, contrary to popular opinion, we're intelligent as hell. Even though we look like this, we speak like this, we are like this. It just means that we're dangerous. And so it's because of these biases that we see so many students of colour underachieving. Nationally, the statistic stands at about 16%. That 16% of students of colour are less likely to achieve what is known as a good degree at university than their white counterparts, despite entering university with the same A-level exit grades. I would put this down to institutional racism. However, I don't want to get too bogged down in having to use facts and figures to exemplify why we need to change our education system and why it's unequal. Because I do believe that we could get to a position that the attainment gap no longer existed, but that does not mean for one moment that inequality has ceased to exist in our education system. It rather means that so many students of colour have had to develop coping mechanisms that no student should have to build. So back to that question, what is education? I always think people take education to be one constitute concept, and that is learning. And we often manage to omit the thinking aspects of education. And I do believe that education takes just as much, if not more, thinking and critical challenging than it does learning and consuming knowledge. I feel like in this country, we almost fear young people genuinely thinking outside of the box, thinking critically, thinking outside of Western knowledge, thinking in a way that may disrupt white supremacy. And I think that this is problematic. You see, colonialism wasn't just the physical brutality and theft of land and resource. It was also the intellectual colonialisms of the minds of the colonial subject. It was the project to make an Ashanti king the vulnerable and obedient subject of whiteness. The sun has not set on the British Empire. And one of the places that is most pronounced is within our education system. Education crafts the people that lead our society, socially, politically, industrially, economically, and so on and so forth. However, what often goes unchallenged is the ideals, the beliefs, and the histories that underpin this education system. Let's take Kant, for example, Immanuel Kant. As a philosophy student, well, if there's any philosophy students in here, you probably know who Kant is. Kant is known as one of the fathers of modern morality and one of the founders of the concept of universal human rights. But what if I told you that this same man was a racist and saw black people as less than human? The general liberal argument to that would be to say that, okay, yes, Kant believed this. However, most people did at that time, so it doesn't really matter that much, and we can just extend his arguments to mean everybody that we now take under the notion of humanity. However, I don't believe that that answer is doing some deeply pivotal things. It's not questioning how somebody who was racist could conceive of universal human rights. It asks us questions such as, how deeply is racism actually institutionalized within our country? And how much we don't understand about philosophy. So we also need to begin to question the way that we look at art. Let me ask you a question now. What is the difference between Shakespeare and Stormzy? In my opinion, there's not much. Hopefully everyone knows who Stormzy is, but there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to learn Stormzy's intricate, important, powerful work in the lecture theatres across this campus in the same way that we learn Shakespeare's poetry. For those that don't know, Stormzy is a UK grime artist and a rapper. However, I believe it is a colonial bias that stops this from happening. It's the colonial bias that means that some forms of art are more valued than others. I recently wrote a paper for my master's looking at intersectional feminism, and I took it a little bit left field. I argued that young black British men in this country have been using intersectional feminism for a long time through UK grime and rap to speak about black British motherhood, a topic that is hardly ever broached. So tonight, I really want to challenge the way that you see education and do a little something. I want to be part of the revolution, never the institution. When I spit bars on my chains, they be loosened. It's a true thing that I'm a product of my environment, and I'ma say it straight that my environment is violence. But not just violence in the conventional kind of way, more than fist thumps in a conventional kind of places, because we do learn knowledge in that conventional kind of way. And that's the flipping violence, colonize my mind, people who look like me been silenced, erased from your history books, science and technology, and please, oh God, don't get me started on philosophy. Plato, Aristotle, even Socrates, who came to black people to learn what they preached, but white men were given all the credit. History's been manipulated with edits, all in the name of white supremacy. I hope you get it, so check it. Roads must fall, but the bankers still rule. They gave us free acres without no mule. Slavery is all we're ever taught. Black in Britain is never given a thought. They teach us, indoctrinate and feed us lies of the system. The system needs us on questioning. Young black Brits to accept the situation and never challenge it. Liberal democracy's a man-made myth. Borders, nations, the whole lot of it. They came into our homes, raped, killing, pillaged, yet we're the ones they don't want in Britain. Empire was so bloody great. We gave you education, and don't forget the trains. We civilized you. Board and a chalk, knife and a fork, but don't want to talk about them sodomy laws. We're all just products of the British Empire where the sun never sets his foot to inspire. But they dehumanized everybody with a shade so dark. Why do you think people of color have it so damn hard? They all still benefit of the heinous crimes of the British Empire. That colonial sun still shines. Thank you. Thank you. So decolonize your mind, and you no longer would have just heard this girl from Southeast London trying to spit some bars at a TEDx talk. You will have heard poetry. You will have heard deep critical inquiry. You will have heard the result of years of critical reading. You will have heard concepts as important and changing as homo-nationalism and neo-colonialism. You will have heard intricate references to Rousseauian social contract theory. You will have heard philosophy. You will have heard wordplay. You will have heard somebody who is armed with a deeply critical mind. You will have heard somebody who is plagued with a diasporic sense of loss. you will have heard a vehicle towards changing our education system. So the Enlightenment period was a massive turning point in history. But just look around the world today. Progress, in the liberal sense of the term, just simply isn't coming about. I truly believe that we need to begin allowing young people to think as broadly as they can, because I think we can see something even more socially changing and magnificent as the Enlightenment period. We must all work together towards a free and liberated education system, one that is decolonized and no longer centers knowledge solely produced in the West. We must transform education. Thank you.